Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning at our City Council study session. That's what we're doing this morning. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get started. Ruth, could you call the roll?
Yes, Adamson. Here. Bray.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Johnston.
Here.
Moore.
Here.
Orr.
Here.
Platt.
Here. Thank you. We'll jump down to agenda item number 2 is Riverside Golf Course Hydraulic Evaluation Final Technical Memorandum Presentation. Bowens Collin and Associates Incorporated will be in attendance to present the findings of their analysis to City Council as to the cause and recommendation solution for ongoing water issues at Riverside Golf Course. Following their presentation, staff is seeking additional council guidance and direction regarding their findings. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor Blatt and council members. John Banks, Parks and Recreation Director. Just a brief recap. You may recall that Riverside Golf Course has experienced some continuing water hammer issues over the past several years, which have contributed to many ongoing pipe breaks over that same period. Staff and 4 golf representatives have attempted to evaluate and address these concerns. However, due to a lack of consensus on cause and no clear solution path, staff sought and was granted permission by council earlier this year to solicit proposals from licensed professional engineers to perform a full irrigation system evaluation and analysis, as well as provide some recommendations to address the hydraulic issues at the Riverside course. Bowen Collins and Associates was selected and approved by council to perform this analysis, and they have completed their final hydraulic evaluation report, which identifies the causes and the recommended solution path for the ongoing issues at Riverside. I'm pleased to introduce Roland Rocha, who's with us this morning from Bowen Collins and Associates, and he's here today to present his findings of the analysis to council. Roland, take it away.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thanks for letting me come today. Let me just start off by saying this problem was a lot of fun to work on because it was extremely complicated. There were a lot of factors going into it, so thank you.
But it's just water, right? That's the amazing part.
It's just water, yeah. There's so much to it. So I'll just jump right into it, and I'll try not to put you to sleep.
Oh.
Now you're an engineer, right?
Yes, sadly.
All right. Hey.
Yeah.
I don't know. Settle down there.
So really, the issue was pipe breakage. We're seeing a lot of pipes being broken. And the challenge with any kind of utility system that we're dealing with is it's all underground, so it's really hard to tell what's going on. And so you have to apply a lot of different techniques to try to figure out what's causing this pipe breakage. So we started out with 6 questions, and you'll see these 6 questions up here on this PowerPoint display. I won't go through them in detail, but let's look at question number 1. What is causing the pipe breaks? I mean, fundamentally, that's really what we're trying to get at. The next few questions, numbers 2 through 5, they're all kind of like guesses, I would say. Everyone had been looking at this problem and they're saying, what if we did this? What if we did this? And it seemed like people took positions and said, we really think this will solve the problem or that will solve the problem. And so these were kind of saying, was I right to guess this solution? So that's what those questions address. And then the last question is really what we get down to is, what is the definitive solution to just solve this problem, make it go away? So that's really what we focused on. Any questions on that so far? Please just interrupt me as we go along if you do have any. So this is a picture of the golf course. So what this does is it shows us what's going on underground. And I'll just point out a few key points to you here, if you can see the mouse. Over here is what we call the Cree well, and you're all probably very familiar with this, but I'll go ahead and just run through the basics anyway. So the well pumps water up out of the ground and pushes it through about a mile-long distance of pipe right here. And then this pipe comes into the golf course irrigation system and distributes water to all the sprinkler heads to keep that grass nice and green. Now, in addition to that well providing water, we have a connection to the city's drinking water system over here on, what's the name of that?
Tick line?
Lundberg Lane, yeah. So this is a safe water connection. So water can only come into the golf course. It can't come back out. So once it comes in, it's irrigation water, and it can get all kinds of dirty, but there's nothing coming back out. So it's safe and protected, but water feeds here. So the issue that we were seeing, we had a lot of pipe breakage down along this part of the golf course that's hashed out here. And as we looked into it, we found that this was the lowest elevation, and your pressures get really high when your elevations get low. So that was pretty intuitive for that area having a lot of breakage. So that's kind of the basics. Let's see, what kind of information? Oh, just some side notes. We came out and we did a full day of testing. We attached a lot of gauges and meters and ran around and tested the system. And what we found was that these homes right in here are using the irrigation water from the golf course irrigation system. We think. We're pretty sure. Everything else was turned off and there was still water running. So, and it wasn't a leak because it turned off and on. So these homes are using water. That's just something to point out because they may or may not be connected to that system safely. And by that I mean, is their drinking water totally separate from this irrigation water? Because this irrigation water can sometimes be dirty. So something to make sure, get out there and check and make sure that everything's safely connected, and that everyone knows what kind of usage they're going through.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you go back to that?
Yeah.
Due to your color, are you differentiating main lines and?
The color coding right down here is
Yeah.
pipe diameter.
Oh, it's diameter?
Hard to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can't see that. So,
Yeah.
so the low area typically has a pipe diameter of what?
The low area down there looks like it has a pipe diameter of 6 inches.
Okay, and so that'd be a main line.
Yeah.
So the majority of the breakage is in a main line system and not lateral.
No, the majority of the breakage is in the laterals.
Okay, so you are, okay.
Yeah. Good question.
Okay, so a question about the Lundberg Lane home. So you're saying you think that that subdivision is using the water that we supply the golf course for their irrigation for their lawns?
Yes, sir.
But it's not metered and we don't know that?
We didn't investigate that, so that'd be something to look into.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they might be getting free water. Who knows?
Okay.
Is that for the whole house or just for irrigation?
Probably just irrigation.
Okay.
Yeah. The usage pattern that we were observing looked like sprinklers coming on and turning off, and then coming on and turning off. And the usage was about equivalent to what you'd expect for sprinklers and hoses.
That can be good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suspect it might be through this little stub right here, this green line. Oh, that's really hard to see. But anyway, there's a little line that was stubbed out, I think originally for the farmer that owned that area before the home got built. So. Any other questions? Good. All right, something else that we found, let me go back to that. Something else that we found is we were doing testing. The pressures weren't quite matching up with what our hydraulic model said they should be. So the model mimics the system, and the model says, here's where it should be if everything is working correctly. And what we observed in the field wasn't quite there. So we started looking at things, and we think, we're pretty sure there are some closed and partially closed valves on the main lines. So what this would do is it would force water to travel around a different way, and it has a longer path to travel, so by the time it gets to its destination, its pressure is lower than it should be. So we think there are some closed valves. Now this isn't something that we think is causing the surge, but it may be contributing to the problems that you're seeing there, because the water has to travel much further, go much faster, all these issues.
So there's a hammer effect at some point?
Yes, yep. So the hammer effect is what is causing the pipe breakage. And we'll get into that here. A big part of this project was getting information, because we couldn't make any determinations or any decisions without having good information, and a lot of the information just wasn't there. So what we did is we really tried to narrow down and get all the best information available so we could give the best analysis and best decision. A lot of boring stuff through here. No one would ever find interesting, but an engineer maybe. So we ran the model, we tested the system, we looked at system records, everything matched up, things were looking really good. In fact, this model calibrated to an extremely high level of accuracy, so we were really happy with that, which means we can rely on the results. Okay, so water hammer. That I've been thinking about this and how to explain this, but maybe we could compare it to a car, because that's somewhat familiar. So if you think about the Cree well as a big dump truck loaded full of rocks, and the gas pedal only has two positions, completely off and completely floored. So when the Cree well turns on, it's like this dump truck, and it comes barreling down the Bannock Highway, and it hits a 90-degree turn where it has to turn, right? Well, it's going to hit the wall with a lot of force, and it's going to break things, and that's what was going on. So the Cree well was really just on or off, and it's sending this big load of water that's nice and heavy, and as soon as that water has to turn a corner or it hits a valve that's closed, it's going to hit that valve with a lot of force, a lot of weight. You think about the weight of a 5-gallon bucket of water and how heavy that is to pick up, multiply that by an order of magnitude or more, and that's how much force you have coming down that line and destroying things. So that's kind of what was happening. We had all this water weight coming down here, and it was all on or all off. And these sprinklers would open and it want everything right away, so the Cree well would send it. Then the sprinkler valves would shut, but that truck's still barreling down the highway. It's going to hit that and cause a lot of damage. So that's water hammer. That's what's going on. So we tried a bunch of different solutions. We tried all the solutions that everyone thought maybe this would work, maybe that would work, and we found that everyone had part of the answer, really, and that's pretty typical in most cases. Everyone was partially right, but it really took all the answers kind of coordinated together with a little more fine-tuning to solve the problem. So right here, I'll just briefly explain. This chart shows what the pressures are doing. So the pressures get really high and they go really low, and they go high and low, and that's like the action of a hammer, just hitting that system. And this black line would be how the system is today. Unmitigated, uncontrolled, no improvements. And so you can see it's just hammering on those pipes with those high pressure spikes. The gray line is after we implement all the improvements that we're recommending. And again, I apologize, this is difficult to see, but the gray line is pretty smooth, just small ups and downs, and that's what you like to see in a water system.
One question. Just before this, you mentioned weight. Now you're talking pressure. So are we talking about velocity and weight, or are we talking about pressure?
Yes, all of that.
Well, okay.
Yeah, so I apologize, it is a little bit convoluted. So the pressures in the system correspond to weight, because pressure is measured in pounds per square inch.
Right.
So we talk about pounds, you can say that's weight, and then that's per square inch, meaning per little segment of pipe.
Okay, so is this water pressure or is it air pressure? As those low areas vacate out and you got air in there before things?
It's water pressure.
Okay.
Yep. And to help explain that, if you think about a swimming pool, as you dive down to the bottom of the swimming pool, you can feel pressure building up in your ears. Well, that's the weight of the water pushing down on you. As you dive down lower, you have more water above you that's pushing on your ears, and so you feel that weight of the water or the pressure. And so hole number 2, which is the low elevation, it's like diving down to the bottom of the swimming pool, and now you're really feeling that pressure, that weight of the water pushing down on you, and that's where all the problems in the breakage occurs.
Just level out the golf
All right, so we'll get down to the solutions. What is causing the pipe breakage? And what we found is that it just wasn't one thing. It was a lot of little things and kind of the perfect storm coming together to cause all of this pipe breakage. So the biggest thing, though, would be that big slug of water that's coming from the Cree well. It just barrels down there and snags in the system. So that's a big issue. Some of the other contributing factors, we have some valving at the well that is designed to relieve excess pressure. But that valve is a mile away from where the pressures are being felt, and it's at a higher elevation. And it's also very small. So the valve would open, but it would open late, and it was really just too small to help out, to help relieve any of those pressures. Some of the other issues, some of those partially closed valves on the golf course system, that was another issue that we saw contributing to the hammer. You also have a long distance from the Cree well to the golf course, and that gives pressure a lot of time to build up, and it does also a lot of water, a lot of volume of water that's swishing back and forth. Some of the other things, the set points for on the Cree well. So the Cree well, it would be running and be pushing water into the system like it was supposed to, but then when the golf course would turn off and the sprinklers would turn off, the Cree well would wait an entire minute before it turned itself off. So it would keep pushing water into a closed system. Now, we set those delays on a well because we don't want the well just turning off willy-nilly anytime it senses a pressure change. We want it to wait and be sure that the pressure has actually changed and it should turn off. But we think maybe a minute is too long to keep pushing water into a closed system, because that's when you pop those pipes. So some of the questions that we had, would reprogramming the golf course irrigation system, would that solve the problem? And the answer is yes, but not really. So yes, you could reprogram the valves in such a way that they would baby the system and really let everything happen gradually. But the challenge with that is that the golf course irrigation system would no longer be usable as an irrigation system. They have a very limited window in which they can irrigate, and they have to be flexible for how much water they need on a day-to-day basis and from area to area. So things have to be changing. And if you're having to baby the system and really watch it and carefully close this valve and carefully open that valve, you just never get it done. So you'd have a yellow golf course out there. So yes, you could solve it, but then you wouldn't have an irrigation system by reprogramming the timing of the sprinklers. So a PRV, would a PRV fix it? Now, if I could just briefly dive into the technical part of things, a PRV stands for a pressure reducing valve. And you probably already know that, but a pressure reducing valve, if we compare that to our car or truck analogy, a PRV might be compared to a speed bump. So as that truck is coming down the road, it has to slow down to go over the bump and then continue on into the golf course. And so that PRV helps, but would it by itself? No, really, because that truck coming 100 miles an hour is just going to hit that speed bump and go flying. So it's really not going to help solve the entire problem. Would a VFD work on the Cree well? And a VFD is a variable frequency drive. And again, going back to our car analogy, that would give this gas pedal more than just two positions, all off or all on. It would give it the ability to modulate anywhere between off and completely on. So you can slowly step on that gas and slowly accelerate or let off, or you have more control over that speed of the water as it's being delivered to the system. So that gas pedal really helps out. But by itself, it couldn't react fast enough, because again, it's a mile away. You think about that mile distance, the damage is already being done down at the golf course when that VFD is trying to react to the system and either push forward or pull back. So by itself, it would not solve the problem. We looked at having both the PRV and the VFD, both the speed bump and the modulating gas pedal, and that gets us much closer. So the variable frequency drive on the Cree well would allow you to slowly bring the system up to pressure and flow and slowly pull it back when it's not needed. And the PRV, or the speed bump down there at the end, would cause the water coming from the Cree well into the irrigation system to come in at an acceptable rate and an acceptable pressure that the system could handle. And the PRV, we would recommend that it be located in the golf course, so it's on site and it's very sensitive and reactive to what's going on inside the golf course as sprinklers turn on and off. Now, the third element that would be required, and this is the definitive solution, is what we call a surge tank. Now, a surge tank is just a big metal tank. It looks like some of those white propane tanks that you see outside the homes out in the country, or septic tanks. Just a big steel tank, and inside it has an air cushion, a balloon, if you will, that's full of air. And air is compressible. So as water enters in that tank, it can absorb some of the shocks, some of these high pressures that like to spike every once in a while when a valve shuts. And it can cushion that blow. So it'd be like having an airbag in a vehicle, just in case you ever bump into anything that would deploy and prevent you from doing any damage to yourself. So those three things together, the VFD, the PRV, and the surge tank, all of them resolve the solution completely and give your system the flexibility that it needs so that it can operate as an irrigation system. So, and that's it. That's the story.
Mr. Mayor, John, maybe you could answer this. How many breakages are we experiencing in a given irrigation system?
Brian's not here, but I'm sure Greg could speak to that.
It's almost a daily thing. Maybe not quite daily, but close to it.
And who makes those repairs now?
We have maintenance employees that do it, but not enjoying their job. It's just a daily thing of digging holes. You got wet spots, digging the hole. Sometimes it's an elbow for the sprinkler head. I personally, with one of my assistant superintendents, I've dug a line from U to U that was completely shattered, like a glass rod. So it's not quite daily, but it's multiple times a week.
Okay,
That's probably easy.
okay, thank you.
So have we decided what action we're going to take to fix it?
No, I mean, we've got a recommended solution path and some cost estimates. This is kind of our first stab at kind of presenting to council and maybe looking for some more direction. I'm fairly comfortable that the bladder tank portion, which is estimated at about $25,000, the golf CIP account, maybe we, put off some cart repairs or do something, and we could absorb that with given resources. I don't want to speak for, Justin and the water department, but, the VFD and the PRV recommendations are significantly more expensive. So we would just be looking to council for direction on kind of preparing to implement this solution.
My first thought would be we need to figure out if that subdivision's getting free irrigation water. Justin, can we talk to you for a second? Could we do that? So, can you tell us your thoughts on that thought? Because to me, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and it was kind of interesting to find that in this study.
Mayor doesn't live out there, does he?
So,
Thinking about moving out though if we're getting free water. So.
I think there's areas that we can look and possibly isolate and see if somebody comes forward and says, hey, I'm not getting the water that I normally do, and then we can investigate things further. That's one path we can take, but we'll do some checking. I've poked around a little bit before because I've had some suspicions of my own of seeing a tap, and both Alan Green and I went to investigate.
But if that's true, and we find out that they are using our water for their irrigation out there, number one is somebody had to intentionally do that. It didn't happen on its own.
Right.
And if it's subdivision wide, that means that the developer had to be involved in it at some point in time. And it sounds to me like there's our money solution for fixing the other end. Because if that's the case, and we could show that they've intentionally been irrigating their lawn for all these years at no cost, sounds to me like they owe some money.
Sure.
That would be my feeling on it, is that it's something that's intentionally been done. It just didn't happen by itself, so
Yeah, it's an illegal connection, for sure.
that might solve our money problems to fix the other end.
There's been some discussion in the past about utilizing some gray water on our golf courses. Is this a time for us to be exploring that, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think it's an option, but I think to use the gray water, there's quite a bit more than the $155,000 phone or bill I'm looking at.
I'm sure, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've talked about that, but
Where would the gray water come from?
from the plant, I think. Talked about running a purple pipe from the plant back out to the end of the port enough to
Be big time.
do some stuff. It'd be fairly expensive to do, but
Lumbered lanes.
this is obviously the fastest fix and the best fix.
There's a whole bunch of places.
I'm interested in finding out about the irrigation of the private properties there.
Yeah, we'll look into it.
I don't know how you go and get $150,000 out of the homeowners out there, even though they've been doing that.
Oh, I think if the city didn't pursue that, you'd be missing the boat. It'd be pretty easy to show what the rest of us are paying for water to irrigate our lawns all these years, and if they haven't been paying for that, I don't think it's something we should just let slide. I mean,
Oh, I don't disagree with that, but I don't know how you go and charge them. You know how much they've used and haven't used, and
It's theft.
maybe it's the developer you look at and you ask, how that happened and find out.
So look at that, these from the picture, it doesn't look like these are old subdivisions.
No, this is a fairly new subdivision.
It's fairly new, and I know the irrigation system on that neighborhood out there, it's a community irrigation system, so
I
I'm
see
not...
a lot of grins out there.
there you go. I mean, to me, it's a community irrigation system, which means all of the lawns are being watered off of one system. And it sounds to me like that water's coming from our system. They know that, they have to know that. And
Well, I suspect this one's pretty isolated down to maybe one residence or another.
oh, you think?
Yeah.
If it's down to one or two, then it's pretty simple to do something. But if it was, you think about it, if you go in and you don't know anything about it, and you've got a house for sale, you're looking, you buy the house, you go in there, you flip your irrigation system on in the summertime, it starts watering along, you don't know that you're not being charged for that water. You just know that you're watering your lawn.
Somebody knows.
Somebody knows, but you don't.
We have utility marks. I mean, you should be able to mark where your water lines are down in that area.
Yeah, we know where all of our stuff is. However, if there's an unknown connection out there and it's tied to...
But if you got a water line that runs right up against the property line, and you just happen to step over the fence and it continues, I mean, there's a little detective work.
We need a police officer. Can you
This would be
jump on
fun.
somebody's lawn to see if they got a water?
Well, we need to get back to going on what we're doing, but yeah, I agree with Council Moore. That needs to be investigated this summer. I'm assuming you'd want to do it when it's a little warmer. Go ahead.
I was going to say, personally, I think there's obviously a problem if we're fixing a pipe every other day out there in the golf course. And I know that we've had these discussions a number of times with Justin and John and Greg. And so I know that there's an issue out there, and I don't know how much water we're losing and wasting because we're breaking pipes all the time. I don't know what that effect is either. And so I think we've got to do something here, and I would be interested in fixing this problem and also finding out where that illegal water is being.
I think there's two issues.
Yeah, there's two issues.
I think there's the issue of how somebody's getting our water. And that may be investigation and turned over to our city attorney. It's not on us to figure that part of it out. And the other part of it, we got to fix the system because it's not fair to have all the repair work they're doing because it takes away from the maintenance of the golf course itself.
So is the Parks Department and the Water Department able to put your heads together and come up with a compromise where both of you are involved in the solution, or are we not at that point?
Yeah, I mean, Justin and I have talked about that. We, neither one of us have budgeted these expenses into our current fiscal 18 budget. If maybe it's a budgeted fiscal 19 expense, maybe, like I say, I think I'm fairly comfortable. I mean, I'd want to run this through the Golf Advisory Committee, but, maybe we put off some things 1 year to find the money to try and get this done. I think maybe we wouldn't have the capability to kind of go halves, I don't think, but maybe Justin has more capability in his budget, but I just think it needs more discussion and maybe some more council direction. But if council is endorsing the findings of this study, that's the first thing we wanted to for sure know, and Justin and I both do. So.
Question?
Councilwoman and then...
Okay.
So I understand that the best solution is to do your variable speed device and to do your pressure reducing valve and to do the tank. But is there a possibility that if we just do one, say the tank or something, to save a little bit on the cost, that it helps enough that we don't have the multiple breaks, and maybe you still might have one once in a blue moon, but it's not quite as much? Or do you think we're still going to have... I mean, I'm just wondering if going part way is going to help quite a bit, or if we really have to do the full solution.
Yeah, great question. And that is one that we looked at. In fact, when we had the model set up, we were able to ask questions like that. What if we just put in the VFD, or we just put in the tank? We also looked at the option of maybe making the tank really big, and that way we don't have to do the other things, just make a really big tank. And all of those financially didn't pan out, and they only marginally improved things. And so how much breakage would that reduce? It's kind of impossible to tell without having a day-to-day activity log of what's going on, but we don't think that the benefits will be there until all three are in place. Now, there are some things that they could do today, and that's what we listed at the end of the memo, that we think would help kind of lessen the blow at no cost or low cost. And so those are the things that would probably the lowest hanging fruit that would give you the most benefit. As you get into some of these capital improvements, it's probably best to implement all three. But if I were to just say, if we don't have the budget and we can only do one thing right now, what would be the biggest bang for our buck? I would say the variable frequency drive on your crew well. That would give you the biggest benefit out of all these three. But again, you're still not going to eliminate the problem. You're still going to have some breakage, but my hunch is that you would decrease the breakage.
But if we put that on and then we still had problems, we could always add the others later, right?
Yes.
It's not like you have to do it at the same time in order to get them.
Freak drives aren't that expensive.
Yeah.
Councilman Orr?
Is the Cree well a dedicated golf course well then?
It is.
Okay. Because I was concerned that your freak drive and things like that, may impact others if they're not there. But
No, it solely feeds the golf course.
correct.
Councilman Bray?
So can we stage this? In other words, the way I look at it is maybe the golf course does the bladder tank, water department, because it's on the well itself, would do the variable frequency drive, and then we move out into another budget year to do the $90,000 thing. Is that something we can stage?
Yeah, from a technical standpoint, definitely. From the budget standpoint.
And implement all the other changes that are down at the bottom as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So what's the total cost here that you've estimated? Like, 24, 25,000 for the bladder tank?
$155,000.
I didn't bring that down.
$155,000 for all three.
155?
The VFD is 40, the PRV is 90, and then the tank is 1.
PRV is 90, that's one PRV?
PRV is 90.
Really? How big is that little bugger?
Well, it'd be a 12-inch, a 10 or 12-inch diameter PRV, but you'd have a concrete valve ball with.
Well, yeah, I understand that part.
Yeah, so that's what adds up your cost.
And then your bladder tank is 25.
My suggestion would be that you two get together with, I think we ought to do the project and fix the problem. We do that with our water systems and everything else, and we never do that kind of halfway. That's why we have such a good functioning system, and it's never a problem for any of us. And I think that's how we should operate that. So my suggestion would be for you two to get together and get together with Joyce, and the three of you put your heads together and see if there's a solution that makes all three of you happy and get after it, would be my. And if that's doing part of it, that's okay with me, but if there's a way to get it all done, that would probably make more sense. If the three of you can figure that out, that would be my recommendation, and then we're out.
No, that's what I agree with that. I think if we're not going to do that, though, you definitely do what Councilman Bray was saying, do the two, but fix it while we're fixing it.
We have an emergency repair fund. Maybe the money could come out of there, or whatever the solution is. It's been a problem for a long, long time, and we need to put it behind us and move on to bigger and better things, and that'd be my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, Mr. Rocha, I gave you a hard time about being an engineer, but you did a really good at taking engineer speak and bringing it down to my 5th grade level.
Thank you.
Thank you, council.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Justin, thanks.
Move on to agenda item. 3. Agenda item 3 is the fire department. All right, every time I mess around with this.
Don't you have a PowerPoint presentation?
Not. No PowerPoint. Good morning, Mayor and Council.
I might get lost.
I guess I'm ready.
Here, well, I'm waiting for this to get back to where it's supposed to be, so
All right,
I
I'll
can
wait.
do this.
So you
Sorry.
can properly announce it.
Agenda item number 3, fire department capital and fire engine purchase plan. Fire department staff will be available to present a proposed capital and fire engine purchase plan. The plan includes the recommendation of a sole source purchase manufacturer for fire engine purchases. Staff is seeking council's guidance regarding the proposed plan. There you go.
Good morning, Mayor and
Back where I
Council.
belong.
Chief Gates, and I'm joined by Chief Smith. So I'm going to just, as you probably all had the summary, I'll just very quickly kind of highlight the plan. What we would desire to do is proceed with a sole source purchase of 3 fire trucks. The 3 fire trucks would be purchased on a 10-year lease to be determined with which vendor. We're not sure. That's for finance to figure out. That leaves us with approximately over the next 2 years, we currently have about $137,000 in capital reserve. This purchase actually wouldn't execute until beginning of 19. So we would actually add the current funding that we have this year that's in our capital and our debt service to our capital reserve, leaving us about $337,000 in capital reserve to execute things like radios and other smaller capital items. I think from our perspective, the reason we want 3 fire trucks, the salient reasons are, A, we have 3 reserve trucks that are already 26 years old. The standard is they should be surplused at 20. We have 3 frontline fire trucks currently that are, the youngest is already at 10 years old, and generally the standard is that you run them 10 years frontline and then 10 years reserve, and then you surplus them. The desire, and if you look at currently we bought back back in 1993, we bought 3 all at once. I'll give you kind of a little scenario that I like to kind of share, and it's one of the things I'd like to get back to having 3 that are the same. Imagine yourself at 2 o'clock in the morning, the bell goes off, you get toned out to a fire, you're the driver operator, the pump operator for that fire truck. You have the potential, you're on a trade, you normally work on engine 2, you're currently working on a trade or a vacation backfill on engine 3, it's a different unit, and your mind's a little foggy, and if you've anybody who's ever played sports or done plays or had that rote memorization of touching and where things are, this isn't my normal truck, and we have to make very rapid decisions. The desire to have 3 fire trucks allows them to all be equally the same. The switches, the bells, the knobs, everything is exactly the same place, and it sets that person up for success because they have the ability to go between those 3 trucks. If I had the ability to maintain that person on a single truck all the time, then it wouldn't be a concern, but we don't have that opportunity. That's not what happens. So that's really why we want those 3 trucks all at once. I think that pretty much highlights our rationale for why we want that, and we'd stand for any questions about what we're really looking for is just the authorization to proceed. We are on a bit of a time crunch because Pierce has said that the price of the truck goes up $17,000 as of February 1st, so we'd like to kind of execute.
I have a question.
Councilwoman Adamson has a question.
Yeah, and just kind of part of this plan was...
Well, I didn't do it.
Part of the plan was that we currently have $121,000 in debt service and $85,000 in capital, and we want to merge those both into the capital. That gives us slightly over the amount necessary for the yearly payment, which is currently estimated at $201,000, depending on the financing options. So.
Okay, so my question was, can you refresh my memory? Because back when we were doing budget time, we had a lot of departments and a lot of numbers, and I'm not remembering this as one of your top urgent priorities that you were telling us about during the budget time. So I guess I'm wondering, am I mistaken and I just forgot, and you did tell me that was one of your department's top things that you wanted was the 3 new fire engines, or is this something you're...
Well,
I'm just curious.
I'm going to say that in the last budget session, we really didn't discuss it very much. I think that we were in a different time. There really wasn't much discussion of what to purchase. We're really kind of, I guess, battening down the hatches, for lack of a better term. The numbers are what the numbers are. The 121 has already been in there. The concept, the plan had always been that we were going to buy our fire truck with that 121. And that the 85 was capital for other things. So I guess there was no proposal to do that because that was kind of an assumption that we were going to use that to purchase a fire truck.
But just for 1, not for all 3,
for
right?
1. And really, the rationale for the 1 was that if we merge these 2, we have the money to fund the 3 fire truck purchase all at once, do it on a 10-year lease. It sets the city up for kind of, in effect, it's a revolving lease. It's going to be 10 years from now, we're going to re-execute this because we're going to need 3 new fire trucks in 10 years. But we're going to need 3 fire trucks in 10 years anyway. And just kind of a sake of argument, if I were to buy 1 fire truck in a 3-year lease, it's $200,000 anyway. So it's not like I'm doing anything different. If I go 3 years for 1 and then 3 years from now buy another 1, the cost is about the same, and we're going to end up, but the benefits of buying 3, we felt as a staff is highly desirable for the rationale that and I can tell you that I joined the fire department right after we bought the 3, and that was a nice benefit and it's not just the pump operator, it's everybody. It's where the equipment bins are, because they're all laid out exactly the same. So when you show up on a fire, your toolbox is the same. Whether I pull this toolbox out or this toolbox out, everything is laid out exactly the same. And it just aids in efficiencies when we're talking time-critical efforts. So,
just to give some clarification, in fiscal year 17, well, actually, technically in 16, they had paid off their ladder truck. We left the debt service in place because the intent was that because they had big pumper trucks that they needed to replace, that we would leave that there and move forward with replacing. with the existing debt service. In 17, that didn't execute, so at the end of the fiscal year, that $121,000 was moved to the fire apparatus capital account, okay? So that it would be set up and could be used for a purchase down the road. So that's where he's getting his capital reserves right now. In 18 now, we haven't changed anything, so nothing was proposed to you. It was part of the existing budget. That's why, with the intent that we do need to replace a pumper vehicle, right? Now, the $85,000 has always been used kind of as their capital, whatever I need this year, that's where it would be obtained from. My first concern when the proposal came through was, okay, what are we going to do? Because now we're going to take away all your flexible capital, right? But then as we took a look at it, it won't take care of you forever, but they at least have, by the time you get to 19 and you're really locked into your debt service payment, you do have over $300,000 that can only be used at the council's discretion for capital needs as the fire department presents it to you. And so there is some carryover that would facilitate it. Will it last you the whole 10 years? I don't think so. I think eventually you'll need to increase their capital, and that's your decision to make. But as far as based on their years of service of the vehicles in place, I think you do have an issue.
Okay. So
I'm concerned in terms of whether or not this fits into the overall picture of what we need to be doing. We need another fire station in the northeastern area. We've got some obvious expansion. How does this fit in with that, Chief Gates?
Well, I think that ultimately it fits in that we still have 3 fire stations that we have to staff, and the trucks that we're running, when we bought the 93s, they were running 2,000, combined as a department, we were running 2,000 calls a year. We're running 8,000 calls a year. They're wearing out quicker. The ones that we have currently, the 2005, 6, and 8, they need to be put in reserve status. They're not as reliable, and so the current stations that we have to be fully staffed and fully functioning. That's staffed. The equipment has to fully operate, and there's really not any ability. I think that this is kind of our base. We still have to look for the future. We're going to have to buy a fire truck for the future. We're going to have to buy a station for a future, and then more importantly, the cost of staffing that station. Those are all numbers that are much bigger, and I think that one of the things that I'm planning to come to you shortly is to contract out a master plan for the fire department that will look at the Northgate development and how that fits in and what we need to do. I know what I would do, but that's, it's good to have somebody else take a look and who has a lot of expertise in that and take the data and really digest, where our call volumes are, what the projected call volumes will be, and what's the best solution to that. So
we had Orr and then Bray.
8,000 calls a year that power of your pumpers and stuff or ladder trucks are running on.
Well, that's our total call volume. They run about 70%.
Okay. Bray?
Well,
are you done?
Do you only get one question at a time?
Well, I didn't know that you had one.
I just
Go ahead.
I heard our CFO say that, and that was my question, there's not enough annual capital in the budget to facilitate this for the 10-year period.
Well, there's enough to facilitate the purchase of the 3 pumpers.
Right.
But then you're going to you have some reserves that will carry you through for a while,
Right.
and depending on what your needs are, do I envision that will last the 10 years? No.
So the expectation, what's the annual payment with this?
201,000 roughly.
Well, roughly, we're still looking at the
Right.
financing.
And then what is typical, the annual council allocation of that capital?
Well, right now they have 85,000 for their what I call their flexible capital. So if you have 300,000 set in there, it's not going to last you 10 years, is it? Because I would need about 800,000 in there to last me 10 years.
Well,
so in that case, but they don't always use their 85,000.
Right.
So given that, I can't predict how much, except based on the needs that they have indicated to me. You have the radios. Somewhere down the line, in 4 or 5 years, you're going to have to replace your ladder truck. I'm trying to think what.
Those are the big ones. The other ones we
Yeah.
can kick down a little further, and we also can look at.
Okay,
things.
but
One thing, can I just address this
Well,
too?
please answer my question first. One, today, how much is the council committing to the fire budget in capital or
Well, there's two things. So there's 121,000 in debt service and 85 in capital.
Okay, so
The debt service
the debt service
was
is
allowed.
for the units, typically.
And my intent would be to
But it's
use,
been paid off now, and we've still been funding that debt service.
Right. And so
And-
you have about 206,000 that I would deem unclaimed capital for future purchases within the
In their
fire
budget.
department.
I understand that. I'm just trying to say, after you deplete this reserve, okay,
Yes.
then you're going to need $200,000 a year for payment.
No, it'll be an annual because he
That's what
won't
I'm
have to,
saying.
he won't have to ask for an increase year after year because it's built into the budget already. As long as we leave those two items alone, he has the amount to cover the debt service.
I understand that, but what you're saying also is that then there's not any capital to expend on other things if we commit 100%
Right.
of it.
Your flexible capital, which is what that 85 was for, is not there. Now, do you have enough to carry you through for the next, let's say, 3 or 4 years? Yes.
Yes.
and I'd like to point out that Joyce is, one of the things that I've always asked for, and Joyce says she's working towards, is once the city has the reserves amount that she is comfortable with, that as departments, when we get at the year end, we typically have given about $80,000 back at year end as kind of that buffer in our budget. At year end, once we get to a reserve status in our general fund, that 85, as she's committed to rolling that back into our capital as well. So that's a savings account that we can, maybe in 3 years, when the city's reserves are at an adequate amount, we can also be adding to that fund through that give back at the end of the fiscal year when we don't spend that 1%. And we have, in the last 5 years that I've been chief, I've given back about 1% a year, which is about $1,000. So that is a way for us to continue to fund that and build for the future, hopefully getting to the point where we are adding to that enough that we could purchase that ladder truck or other things.
I think that's a good way to approach
Right, but there will become a time when the council will have to commit some type of adjustment. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilman Bray.
When you talk about the long-term strategic plan, what is the objective of that plan? Is it to stay status quo, like our 3 rating, or is it to try to be strategic and get to a 2 rating like Idaho Falls just recently got to?
So when I've talked with the vendors that provide that type of service, what they generally will do is talk about what is currently. They'll look at growth. They're going to look at where the growth is going, what that is likely to do to your call volume, and they're going to give you various options. And let's start with, they're going to also look at us based on standard performance metrics that fire services are basically evaluated to. And they're going to say, well, this is where you are today, and this is where the performance metric says you should be. And then they're going to design a system that helps you get to that, but realizing that costs money. For us to get to a 2 will be costly. Idaho Falls, we're a low 3, and I think the question was asked, I wasn't here, I apologize for that, but the question was asked, will that force us to a 4? The jury's out, but we are not a strong 3. So we're a low 3. So yeah, it could be that by adding Northgate, if we do nothing, that we could drop to a 4, and that would be a substantial hit on insurance rates. I think where we're also a low 3, to get to a 2 would take significant capital investment, and knowing that we are not in the best, or have not been in the past, the best financial situation. For me, that was just never something that I felt was reasonable to propose, because when we're talking about not expanding services, getting to a 3 or a 2 is clearly an expansion of services, and it is not going to be without a price.
Is there a strategy that we could exercise jointly with Chubbuck, though? Because if
Absolutely.
Chubbuck, I know it's been worked on, but this would be one of those perfect storms that. comes along.
Thank you very much. You just served me the big meatball. That absolutely. I think that we are crazy not to consider that.
Well, there are 5, I understand.
And they would have become a 4, was what our ISO representative said, that they would have been a 4 just by consolidating with us. And that helps us because we end up with a ladder truck on both ends of our jurisdiction. Just the basic framework of this, and we're going way off topic, but I don't mind because I love talking fire stuff. But anytime you can reduce your borders, because every time I place a fire station, if I have a border, there's no sense in placing a fire station against a border, because think about it, my arc of response is 180 versus 360. So you really want your fire stations placed so that they're not close to borders. And so by having that border of Chubbuck, I have a border. Whereas if I don't have a border with Chubbuck, then I can respond to, and as you move away from the center of cities, you have that natural reduction in population, right, as we go to the fringes of our city. So we want our fire stations more central, and since we're butted up against Chubbuck, that's all, we'll call it urban. And since it's urban, or almost metropolitan, it's not beneficial to have that border split in a metropolitan area at all.
So if you did that, it drops them to a 4, and we're a week 3. Do we bounce up to a 4?
We would become a strong 3, and then it becomes a
3.7.
And I don't want to tell you that I don't have those. It's a very complex thing. It takes into account your water system. It takes into account your fire response, our training, our apparatus, our staffing. It takes into account dispatching. So there's some factors that I don't control, but we generally do very well in the water. I can just tell you that our water system is always given. It's not our problem area. Most of the time for us, it's our staffing and our apparatus. And the tower truck, having an unoccupied area. The other big one is and they're changing. The old ISO system they drew a dot on the map and said, were you within 3 miles of that dot? Did you cover your city within 3 miles? And you lose credit. The new system is more response time based. And so it's a more realistic approach. It's saying, can you get there? It doesn't matter if you're within 3 miles. If I got an interstate and I can jump on the interstate and be there, in a minute and a half, it doesn't matter that I'm 3 miles or not 3 miles away. But the concept is the same. It's how quickly can we get to the various incidents and be there quickly and affect change.
Okay, we got one more follow-up and then more.
My other comment would be, when we're looking at a static budget right now, projecting it out to the future, that's not reality. and because we will have demands for other uses, that's the nature of growth. And so to take a static basis and overlay it to future growth, as this will fix everything for 10 years, it won't.
So, and just to address that, my department has asked me, well, why are we putting all this money? And I fully believe that our top 3 capitals are 3 engines, 1, 2, and 3. If I don't have, those are our primary response vehicles. If I do not have those, if those are not functioning, then the rest is just pie in the sky. And yes, we need a ladder truck in the future. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. Whether that means I come back to you and say, hey, I've saved $400,000, but I need a little extra, or however that rolls out, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Certainly we're thinking about it. We know it's on the horizon and we need to be planning for it. But
okay, we got more, and then Brown.
I just want to suggest, Mayor, that I think it's a good plan. It puts us doing this now puts us in better shape for whatever happens in the future. Something's going to happen. We don't know what that is yet. This puts us in a better position to deal with that. I think it's a good plan. I think we ought to execute it.
I'm a little hesitant on the front end of this because we're in the beginning processes of having a really healthy budget. And we're in a good spot financially, and we're building on that. However, I kind of look at this a little like level pay on all my utility bills. I know if I do it at the wrong time of the year, it's not going to be all that fun for a few months. But I know what to budget for 12 months, 2 years from now, because I have a general idea of where I'm going to be. And so I kind of like that, instead of having to say, okay, we paid that off, we may or may not keep the debt service in the budget because we may have other issues we've got to deal with. And so maybe we steal that money for a little while, but then we have a vehicle that's really struggling, we need to replace it, now we're back in the same problem that we're now today. And so, but the comment of we're wearing them out faster brings me back to my dog chasing a badger down a hole thing. Okay? Triage vehicle. If we're wearing them out faster and they're becoming more expensive, we've got to do something different. We've got to change the system. And that other jurisdictions are effectively using triage vehicles, whether that's a truck or a motorcycle, whatever that is, they're effectively using that. We've got to figure out how do we implement something like that to add extended life to our vehicles, to our people, so they're not getting burned out, so they're not having the injuries that they're having before. So please add that to your comprehensive plan. I'm not going to let that go. I'm just going to keep pounding that drum. So,
Mayor and Councilman Brown, and that is in our plan. And honestly, and just to reiterate what I've said a couple times, the first step in that process is getting Pro QA, which we're in the process of getting implemented. I just talked to Captain Nelson yesterday with the PD that we are progressing well. But in order to send what we're defining as the right resource to the right call, we have to identify that call in the front end, and dispatch is critical to that component. And when we feel comfortable that we know that that call is that type of call where I can send that lesser response vehicle that's not as expensive, I guarantee you we are moving in that direction. That is where we want to be.
So let me ask you a direct question that may not be all that comfortable. This process of moving that forward, where is the bottleneck? Is that with the fire department? Is that with the police department? Is that in the dispatch? Where is that?
The bottleneck, as I learned yesterday in my HR training, is it's change. And change is difficult, and people...
Yeah, we don't want to be doing that.
People are very resistant to change, and it's trying to...
I'm too old to change.
Change makes us stronger and makes us better. And so if there's an issue with blockage because of change, then it's the council's responsibility to call somebody on the carpet. We just have to have the backbone to do that. And we've been doing better over the years. So if there's something that we can identify that we can poke a stick at and break that blockage, then let's do it. Because
if you want me to be very blunt, then go to a consolidated dispatch center. I'll be blunt.
I'll vote for that.
A consolidated dispatch center is the right answer. I can tell you that every fire department, I've put this out on the web, whatever you want to call it, and asked the question, and every fire chief I've ever said is, as long as you have a police department centric or a law enforcement centric dispatch center, you'll never get the service you want in fire and EMS. They said once you get a consolidated system whereby it's not beholden to law enforcement only, then they respond. And it's not, I don't mean to put them on that. It's just that they work with them daily, and so they know what they know what the law enforcement needs. We're not in there.
Well, and turf, that's just the inherent nature of turf.
And so I think that's the solution is really having a singular communications director who answers to a board, and the board can be the police chiefs, the fire chiefs, the sheriffs. That's my solution. And I just recently had the sheriff tell me he's actually more supportive than he's ever been in the past of that.
Is it because he's close to retirement?
I don't know.
If that's the
I've
case,
been
let's take
beating on him
advantage
for a lot of years.
And I know that this feels like we're way off topic. I know that this feels like it's way off topic, but I think it's directly impacting your budget and what we're talking about.
I agree.
And so,
I 100% agree.
how do we move forward with that?
Well, the mayor
What's
and I
the
have
next
taken lots of
step?
political heat over that. Well, I think the next step is to get the jurisdictions that would be involved in that and start the conversation again.
Get them together, yeah. That's the directive.
But should you have political will as part of it too?
Well, and I'm not the political body.
You know what I'm
Yes.
saying is, as long as it's jurisdictions, you can figure out solutions among yourselves, but if there's no political will there,
I 100% agree.
You're just treading water.
You'll have the best dispatch center you'll ever have if everybody were together.
Well, and
It would be a powerful system.
I understand the argument of the past that we need redundancy. But when one goes down, it doesn't go to Chubbuck, it goes to Boise. And so that's not a real argument.
Well, in this day and age of virtual dispatching, it's really easy to have that be anywhere.
Right. It doesn't make sense to me.
And I'm not a dispatch expert. I really hate to tread in the dispatch realm.
But as a taxpayer, I pay for the city of Pocatello's dispatch center, and I pay for that redundant service at the county. And I pay for the Idaho Police Department dispatch. And so, really, it's stupid.
Always has been, Steve.
I know.
It always has been.
And we talk about this during budget time, and it lasts about that long, and we move on. And
So I have a question internally.
somebody must have been watching TV.
So I have a question internally. Let's just say, for example, that you never get there. You never pull that off. Is there something we can do long-term internally to make it better?
I think
and to make everybody happy, but to make the system function better? Is there something?
So I think the ProQA was our solution, and that was a very systematic approach to EMS dispatching. It's a very systematic question-answer routine that a dispatcher goes through to identify the proper medical call. I think the police department's been working very well to get towards that. We were a little rocky. I think that, again, it was change, and the change is always difficult. Everybody resists change. My guys all resist change. They're about as resistant to change as everybody else I know. That just shocks you, I'm sure. But it's change, and I think that we did what we called the reset, and I think it's been moving forward, and I'm very pleased with where it's going. And I think that there's been, ProQA has been much more engaged with us this time. We have a vendor who comes out regularly and is talking about the successes and what's going on. And I am just very comfortable. It's not fast. I mean, I'm a little bit. God didn't give me patience, so I want it to be yesterday. But the fact of the matter is that when you think of the magnitude of what we're asking them to depart from the way they used to do things to what they're doing now, I'm very pleased with where we are.
Well, and historically, we've really had a good dispatch center right here in town. And if this other thing doesn't happen, I think that there are opportunities within our own system to accomplish the things that you're talking about. Keep everybody happy, get the job done. I think there's things we can do there as well. So.
Well, I say it once every year. I have a book called Change is Good, You Go First. I'd be glad to give everybody a copy.
I think the ProQA and that reset, because we've done it for a while and we've tried it, and it wasn't working, and ProQA is now a lot more active and receptive to things, and we're working to make that better. So I think within our own system right now, we're taking those steps to make some of those changes.
Okay.
So our desire is to come to a council meeting as quickly as possible to get approval to proceed with this, and because we need to get this done. So
Next week?
Well, I don't know if we can do next week, but close. Joyce is just at least the financing end of things. But
I just wanted to see
Next week we have a meeting, a working lunch, I believe, next week that will talk about the things that happened in today's study session and kind of get the council's feel on things like this, and this will definitely be one of the topics. So.
Well, it doesn't make me comfortable. I think it's a good idea.
Does anybody have any other questions about the sole source? I mean, certainly that's a big one, but it's important that we go that route. So, okay.
Good way to go.
Okay, thank you. Move on to agenda item number 4 is the December budget amendments for fiscal year 2017. Representatives from the Finance Department will be present to provide information and explanation for proposed December budget amendments for fiscal year 2017.
We don't.
That's the case.
By the way, I do appreciate the uniform attire today.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Okay, proposed December budget amendments. I know this is a first.
This is our favorite part.
Huh?
This is our favorite part of any meeting.
Is it?
Budget amendments. Well, we-
I can whip through these in 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. No, it really is.
Okay. So we have 23 listed amendments affecting 11 funds. The public hearing notice published on December 6th and December 13th as required by law. We're holding the study session today so that you can understand what the amendments are. And then on December 21st, we will hold the public hearing. And then at the end of the meeting, you'll have the ordinance section and you'll take into consideration the amendments and vote for their adoption at that time. Okay, so in the general fund, we had a total of $57,249 in budget amendments. In the mayor's department, the mayor participated in a walking challenge, and by participating in that, he received a $1,000 donation, which has to be used for either a contribution to a public school or a public park. And so that will be decided upon. But this will give authority for him to expend those monies. Authority to refund monies for records requests received in excess of actual costs. So we had some records requests. We collect the money up front. When we actually executed those, that they were less than what we had collected. And so this is authority to refund those monies back.
I have a quick question about that. Sorry, I'm going to make you go past your 5 minutes.
Oh, that's all right.
So what are the actual costs? Is it just like the paper, or does it also include like time?
Time.
It does?
Yeah,
So
it's
that
both.
was factored in? Okay.
Up to 2 hours, and I can't remember how much paper, Ruth could probably tell me.
I'm sorry?
On records requests, it's free up to 2 hours of labor, and is there a certain amount of paper that we can?
First 100 pages are free,
Yes.
and that's determined by the Idaho State Legislature.
Yes. So these were above and beyond that, obviously, by the price tag you're seeing that we're refunding. Okay.
Joyce, we give them an estimate of what we anticipate it costing, and that's why they
Yes.
overpaid that.
Yeah, we have to err on the side of conservative so that we make sure we collect the amount that we need to collect in order to execute. And then as you go through and you start executing it, sometimes it went faster than you intended, or
that's
that you
like what
thought it would
happened, is
be,
it
and
took
so
less
then this
time?
happens.
Okay.
So how many accounts or clients or
This is 2 records requests.
just two record requests?
Wow.
Okay.
In the police department, we had an abandoned vehicle. Of course, we have that towed and stored, and then we auction the item, and then those monies that we receive from the auction cover the cost of the towing and the storage of the vehicle. And so this is $1,855 that we need in additional authority to cover the cost of that event. In the animal shelter, Rhett has been doing a great job. He received 2 donations totaling $40,000 for the surgical equipment for a surgical room at the animal shelter. And so he's asking for authority to expend those grant monies. In the Parks Department, we received a donation from Neighbor Works for Christmas lights at Caldwell Park, $9,991. And I heard the lights are really great.
Beautiful. They're really nice.
So. Other fund amendments total $3,854,708. The first 3 were actually proposals presented to you in fiscal year 17. We just weren't able to execute them completely in time before we started fiscal year 18. So in the cemetery, they just finalized the purchase of their flatbed truck, so that authority that we gave them in 17, it doesn't exist in 18, and so we're asking for it again. In the airport, they had a roofing repair for the terminal roof. The retainage expenses, they had to go through all their checklists. That did not complete until fiscal year 18, so that's the $2,000 that they're requesting an authority. In the library, they wanted to upgrade their lighting fixtures. That approval was given in 17. We weren't able to execute it, so we're going to do that this year, and so that's the authority we're asking for. Transit rural, we have grants and reserves in the rural program to repair a sinkhole at the PRT facility. It's estimated at $25,000, and so we're asking for authority on that. Transit rural, grants and reserves to purchase equipment, wash bay, forklift, radios, tire mounting and balancing equipment, and man lift equipment, totaling $107,500. Also in the transit rule, you have use of grants and reserves to purchase 2 cutaway buses and 1 accessible van in Cache Valley, totaling $340,000. Transit urban, use of grants and reserves for the bus stop improvements for 7th and Sherman. This is also connected to a CDBG grant, so it's kind of a combination between transit and CDBG. But that's $250,000
For a bus stop?
for all the parts to a bus
That's a
stop.
terminal, isn't it?
It might be a grand one, but it's amazing the costs that go in. But I think the plan is, the way I'm seeing it, it will be more conducive on 7th and Sherman because right now you block the road.
We've talked about that, and council's approved the study of it and making it happen, and it's this one out here in the corner, and they're talking about cutting away that and making it safe for pedestrians and safe for the ridership and safe for cars traveling back and forth.
Which makes it a little more expensive. It's not just a bus or a bench and a shelter. There's more to it than just that part. So in transit urban, you have grants and reserves used to purchase 3 low-floor buses for demand response, $420,000. And transit urban, use of grants and reserves for consulting contract for long-range plans, $75,000. In the sanitation fund, we're requesting use of reserves. They had excess reserves last year to address facility issues. That's $1.5 million. Water pollution control, use of reserves to purchase a camera van, which was budgeted in 17, but was unable to be executed until 18 due to the phosphorus project. There was a delay, and so that's $281,242 in authority needed. Street federal aid projects, use of reserves for expenses related to the Center Street Underpass project, $26,000. Street equipment capital, we have savings account for capital purchases, and we're asking to use the reserves to purchase a used aerial bucket truck for $75,000. Capital acquisition. Last year at the end of the year in City Hall and the engineering department, we had savings there, so we moved monies to capital acquisition knowing that, and this year we were wanting to do some remodel in the planning and engineering departments in City Hall. That's $170,000. We're asking for authority so that they can execute that project. Did you have a question?
Yep.
Which one do you want me to go back to?
Bounce back to the sanitation.
Okay.
Use of reserves to address the facility issues. Is that the facility issues at the facility now, or is that's at a...
Well, it's our addressing of the problem. We've looked at moving. We know that we have issues there, so this money will go towards whichever solution we come to the facility issue, whether it's moving into a new facility or what. Okay?
Okay.
Does that answer that?
That answers that, yes.
Okay, so that one. Okay. In capital acquisition fund, we are asking for authority to expend capital contingency savings from fiscal year 17 upon the discretion of the city council. Last year, you had, okay, I'm going to have to remember, like $619,000, that was capital contingency. We didn't expend it all. We had left $279,942. All we're asking for here is authority when you make a decision to use those funds for a purpose that we have authority to expend it. Capital acquisition, use of reserves to expend match reserves for the capital equipment and vehicles. For transit urban operations, $165,663. Remember, this is the urban side. So when they close their year, there's 2 things we're doing to facilitate capital purchases for transit. Advertising can be moved, and we're doing that, and not utilizing that revenue this year because you can utilize it more heavily if we wait and expend it in a future year. So those dollars are moving into capital acquisition. And then at the end of the year, whatever you allotted in the general fund for match, if he doesn't expend it all, we move that to capital acquisition, and he can utilize that for capital purchases so that he can accumulate enough dollars to make those purchases. And so that's what we're drawing from.
I don't think so.
Okay, capital acquisition authority to expend reserves for the continued development of the Creekside Bike Stop. We received last year in 17 a $20,000 donation. Well, it was a little over 20,000, but we've only expended, as you can see, roughly around 6,500, and so this is the remaining dollars, so that we have the authority as they continue to develop that bike stop. We have the ability to expend those monies.
So it's not costing the city anything for that?
No, it was all based on a donation.
No, it's the mayor's problem.
Yes. So this is the total by fund. So you can see it's $3,911,957 in total requested amendments. So next Thursday at our December 21st council meeting, we'll hold the public hearing, and then at the end of the meeting during the ordinance section, you'll take into consideration the proposed amendments. And that pretty much concludes it.
Question, so these big fund requests, they've come before us, or this is what they want to do and they'll come before the city council in the future?
Which ones are you meaning?
Well, let's say like planning and engineering over there for $179,000.
For the $170,000? I don't know if they've officially come before council with the proposed. It's just kind of, with all the moves that we've made in engineering and planning, we're just trying to address the facility issues that we have right now and get the offices mapped out a little more appropriately.
For planning and engineering, they'll be back in front of council before we spend that money.
I mean, I realize that we've had discussions about some of these others. There's others up here that I just didn't remember.
Yeah, and I couldn't remember if that has, we're on the early stages, but once I learned that they were moving in that direction, when I saw they had savings last year, I said, well, let's move the money and put it aside so that if that comes through, then we have the ability to...
You're taking it out of the CD and putting it in your savings account. You're taking it out of the CD and putting it in your savings account.
Yes, and saying it's allocated for that. Of course, it's going to be up to the council as to whether that's important.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's it for me, unless there's any other questions.
Another city study session before, so we see it, what it looks like. Questions? No. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I was 5 minutes.
You were longer than that, but that's all right.
I gave it a shot.
Agenda item 5, proposed revisions to Animal Services City Code, rabies, quarantine, vaccination, licensing, and spay and neuter program. Animal Service staff will present proposed revisions to City Codes 6.04.070, 6.04.180, 6.04.150, and 6.04.155 to bring the codes in line with nationally recommended standards and create a voucher program to facilitate spay and neuter surgeries for pets owned by Pocatello citizens. Good morning, Red.
Morning, Mayor. Morning, Council. Red Nix, Animal Services Director. We're seeking guidance on currently rewriting an ordinance that deals with our licensures, tying that to a voucher program, as well as a few other changes to move things like our quarantine protocols into in line with national standards. The overarching goal is to move this section closer to a public health model rather than a dog catcher model that we currently operate under. We did change the cat license last year. I have some numbers on that. It wasn't quite as effective as I think it was hoped to be. I think we captured a portion of the market we knew we were already going to capture instead of capturing the folks that we were hoping we were going to capture so we could return the animals home. The goal is to tie our licensing program to rabies. Currently, we're the only city in the state of Idaho that doesn't have a rabies requirement for licensing. So when you get a dog license, you just get a dog license, which is a tag with a number on it. To be quite honest, with the staff I have, we don't have all of this year's tags entered yet. We probably won't until we start issuing new tags again. We can solve that later down the road with software possibly, but right now I would just like to tie our rabies vaccination to our dog licensing, therefore effectively licensing the rabies. This does require some work with the veterinarians. We've met with, I believe, 6 of the veterinarian clinics to date, including 2 that are outside of the city because they service a large large portion of this community. And we have one or two to go. We just haven't been able to make dates match and work up together, or been able to get the same time when Danielle and I can make it there to talk to them. We've had pretty good response so far. I did have an offer from a veterinarian to come talk to you today with me. I told her we're just starting, so I may use her later. We're looking to move the licensing. If we did this, the licenses would solely be sold by the city and by the veterinarians, because the only person that can provide a rabies vaccination in the state legally is a veterinarian, which means the vet clinics at the time of vaccination would issue a license. They would remove the licenses they would be annual or 3-year. Rabies vaccinations run annual or 3-year. There would be a pricing and a fee schedule accordingly for annual or 3-year, as well as for intact and non-intact, which we currently have in place. We would just have to add the 3-year tier to that. The vet clinics, that would move us out of having what would be an annual on the same date recurring licensing system. May in the shelter is insane. We offer a discount for licenses, and we wind up just killing our front desk. We have lines of 10 or 15 people, which then kind of pushes adoptions off to the side as we move through licenses, and it's not super effective. We also have other organizations issuing city licenses, which is a bit of an official document, that are outside the realm of what I would consider the professional veterinary clinic, or people that would deal with dogs or animal welfare locally in the city. By using the veterinarians and using just the shelter, we've pretty much narrowed it down to the only 2 people issuing license are either people licensed by the state to practice veterinary medicine, or the shelter, which has the authority to issue license itself on behalf of receiving a certificate that says the animal's been vaccinated. With this, I would like to add a voucher program to it. We have an obvious, and I know it's obvious because I've been talked about cats since I've gotten here, and everybody's talked to me about cats since I've gotten here. We have a pretty obvious issue with the number of animals we have running around, primarily cats. I can tell you that in the summertime, and kind of oddly, even up until now, we're full on cats still. I received kittens yesterday. I received a question about spay or neuter resources day before yesterday, one on Facebook, I think 2 days ago. I received 4 or 5 every day almost. It's insane in the summertime. We do have resources in the private sector that help out, but they're only capturing a small portion of the market. For the citizens, I would like to return some of the money coming from tags back to the citizens in the form of vouchers. I've talked to the vet clinics about this. I have no desire to enter their pricing models. They have their business. I want them to run their business. They know what it costs. I would like to just provide a service where we say, if your animal is vaccinated, your animal has a rabies license from us, you're a resident within the city, and you have an appointment scheduled for a vaccination, that we provide a voucher out of the funding that we get that goes into the general fund from licenses I'd like to push 50% for kittens and cats, and anywhere between 50% or less for larger dogs. For those that don't know, the spay or neuter is usually a sliding scale. Female dog costs significantly more than a male dog. Female cat or kitten costs significantly more than a male cat. Roughly 80 to 60 is what usually gets us into the 50 range, scaled down from 80, 75, 65, 60, spayed dog, neutered kitten. So that incentive provides something for the citizens. It also provides something for my vet clinics, who I'm currently asking to deal with another licensing headache. Most of them aren't fond of the current licensing program. I've kind of cut flack for that, the cat licensing in particular from the vet clinics. This one, I at least have a majority positive response going on. The voucher system would go solely to the vets that participate in this, that do issue our licenses, as a way to say, hey, I know I'm giving you more paperwork. Your front desk is going to have to fill out another license form, things like that. But we are allowing people to come to you in the public. We're covering a small portion of the spay or neuter, so you can help your clients, as well as we're reducing the number of animals we see. That would be the voucher program. The quarantine program, we're looking to move in national line with the CDC, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce the acronym because it's about a mile long. But there is a group of veterinarians federally that promulgate what's called the Rabies Compendium every year. We're looking to have our officers, so typically the only time we need to have a veterinarian intervene with a quarantine is if we see signs or symptoms. All of my officers and essentially all my staff to the point are trained. My officers are trained by being nationally certified to obviously know signs and symptoms of rabies. All of my staff know them as well. they would then be able to take animals off quarantine at home. Currently, we require citizens to go to a veterinarian. The CDC promulgated the 10-day quarantine for the simple fact that if the animal was rabid at the time that it bit, it would be dead in 10 days. The time it takes for the rabies virus to move from the salivary glands to the brain tissue, in which point the animal starts to show major signs or symptoms and usually dead within 5 days. They doubled that. They got 10 days. You're going to see the largest probability of most of your animals dying within 10 days if they were rabid at the time of the bite, which is what we're concerned about. We're concerned about if an animal bites a human, if the animal's rabid, we need to get immediate care for the human to try and mitigate the moving and the transfer of the rabies up the nervous tissue to the brain. We're also removing animal-on-animal bite. I've never been in a city, and I can't find anybody comparable that regulates animal-on-animal bite. The way it's currently written is kind of strange, and I'm going to use a funny anecdote at this point. It's literally written animal-on-animal, which means that covers the entire animal kingdom, which means if I have a turtle bite a cow, I now have to come up with a quarantine protocol for a turtle. For those that don't know, turtles are not rabies vector species. They can't carry rabies, and there is no quarantine protocol for a turtle. The only quarantine protocols that exist nationally are dog, cat, and ferret. I'm not sure why they have ferret, but it's always ferret. Removing animal versus animal, we have a means to deal with that. If we have animals hurting animals, we have a nuisance law. We also have a dangerous dog law, so if an animal significantly hurts another pet or domestic animal, we have a means to deal with that. The transmission of rabies would not be probable. We also have other laws that deal with another law added in to some degree of reporting. If you have an animal that's rabid or you suspect an animal that's rabid, especially in the professional field, we ask you to report it. The vets would obviously report it and let us know because we want to get it to county health department and test it. For those that don't know, we had the first rabid bat in the state too. So we do see rabies on occasion. It's one of those things that nobody thinks about, but the first rabid bat in the state came across my desk. It came from outside the city, but we're a hub and the shelter acts kind of as a regional hub for folks, so when somebody has a bat that interacted with their dog and it was rabid, they brought it to us to get it tested. That would be essentially the majority of the changes that you would see. Does anybody have any overall questions?
Councilwoman Adamson has.
Yes, I had a little list that I wrote when I was reading through all your stuff.
Yeah.
So what other entities right now sell licenses?
We have several stores, McKee's. We also have the NCOA. We have, I can't remember the other two stores. We have two other stores that sell them as well.
Okay.
As well as the vet clinics and the shelter.
Okay, so if we go down to only the vets and the shelter and they can't do it at the pet store or anywhere else, do you think that will decrease the amount of people that are getting licenses? Is there a possibility they will, or do you think they'll still go do it?
Well, the license will be tied directly to the rabies shot. So if they're getting a rabies shot, they'll get a license. The majority of folks are going to be vaccinating their animals. There's already and again, this is trying to capture the market. We're going to capture the people that are going to do it automatically. If I do see a decrease, it'll be because people aren't vaccinating their animals, which is an issue we would have to address in a different manner. There is a socioeconomic issue with vaccinating animals that occurs, and typically low-cost clinics or how you capture that. We did put a clause in to make sure that we could issue tags to that without, charging ourselves $1 million for tags to get lower-income folks vaccinations. I don't personally see a major issue. I would be capturing, if we're just throwing tags out there for the sake of having a number on a dog, that's kind of an antiquated model. Tags in the number sense were originally issued as identification for animals. We would prefer to move to microchips. Microchips, not only in the legal realm, have become kind of definitive proof of ownership. If the information on the chip matches the animal, that's where we're at. It's also much more, it's longer lasting. The numbers of the tag, they don't fall off. They're there all the time. We would rather see that number system move to where we give people an incentive to microchip, which is also included in any change in ordinance. I don't see a significant drop, to be quite honest with you. If anything, we might be able to capture more people that are willing to vaccinate their animal and not license their animal. We have people come to us that their dog gets out, runs loose. They don't have a city dog tag, but they've got all the rabies shots and everything. Because most people take their animals, the majority will take their animals to take care of them. They don't want them to get sick.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if the vets are doing the license, what about if you have people that live in the county then? They can still just go get their vaccinations, but they're not going to require.
No, I can't. Yeah, I can't. Yeah. I have no authority for people not residing within the city. What we do with the shelter would provide is we would provide license for people to have their animals vaccinated outside of the city. So let's say somebody wants to go to Blackfoot or Idaho Falls because that's their vet, and I know vets are like doctors. People tend to travel to the same one. They could show up at our facility. We would know know the rabies certificate coming from that shelter, and if need be, we could check, or from that veterinarian, we could check, and we could issue a rabies on our authority, seeing the paperwork coming from another veterinarian for a rabies vaccination.
Okay. I guess my question, though, was like, if the vets are going to be requiring it as part of their rabies thing, and the vet is in Pocatello, I guess it's just, they have to find out if the person is a Pocatello resident.
Yeah, they would know if whether they're a resident or not.
Okay.
And we do actually have residents outside of the city that get tags. We have quite a few that live on the edge that get tags because they use them as a means of return. Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, we usually try to tell them it'd be better just to pay for a microchip. It'll be there forever. You don't need a tag every year. And when we scan your dog, my officer might be able to return it in the field.
Okay. The other question I had was, you had noted in your information that the animal license revenue was $35,000 in 2017. $35,316. So if 75% of that was going to go towards the spaying and neutering voucher, what would that be taking it away from? Like, what is it going towards now?
It would be coming, what would it be? It would just be coming out of general fund revenue that the general fund typically sees. So it would be about 25.6. Last year was 35,316.
Because I just remember you saying you need more dog food, you need more, you guys were
we do.
a little bit on the budget. So I'm just wondering
we do.
What would be the strategy to...
Well, dog food, we just got a Hills agreement, so we should be, I'm not going to say we're good on dog food because I don't want to see an increase this year and be short again. By moving the budget, changing the budget on dog food, that was actually reduced the year prior. I'm still not sure why we reduced it, because we knew the year prior that we spent that much money and we reduced it below the amount we spent. We've got a Hills agreement, so we're seeing a discounted dog food and a better dog food coming in. So it's a higher grade dog food. We feed less of it, and we get a discount on it to begin with. As far as the budget moving, this would be something, the only way I'm going to solve the number of animals I have, I'm never going to adopt my way out of it. To be quite honest with you, I can't euthanize my way out of it either, is to reduce the number coming in. That is the only effective measure that's going to generate a decrease in the number of animals we see running at large and the number of animals we see in the shelter. I'm in a peculiar spot because we operate almost as a regional shelter, because if somebody comes to us with an animal and they're from outside of the city, I say no, they drop the dog off within the city, and now I have a dog I have to chase and spend more resources to get. Solving it within the city, we can do that hopefully with some sort of program or voucher to give the citizens back something that need the resources to do it. And to be honest, it would be, I've had discussion about need-based, so I'll cover that one too. If they're paying money for tags, then it should be a citizen broad endeavor. In a sort of measure for me, if you show up and you have, you pull up in a $200,000 car, I'm going to issue you a voucher, but I'm also going to give you a tour of my shelter and discuss the other things we have going on. However, if you show up and you just need a voucher, that would be, of course, something we would want to provide in order to get an animal spayed or neutered. We have a significant number at my front desk that bring us kittens more than once a year, year over year, because it's easier to bring me a litter of kittens than it is to pay the $60 or $80. If it's $60 or $80 is a half a tank, is 2 tanks of gas to get to work. If I'm going to pay gas in my car, as opposed to spay my cat, I'm going to put gas in my car. Kind of actually been there personally. It's one of those things where they're not going to. It's an expense that's not going to occur, and it's a luxury expense, and then people aren't going to fill that or accomplish that without some sort of help at some point. Currently, the private sector we have here is helping pretty well, but they can't keep up. They won't ever be able to match the need that we would need within the city. So essentially, I'm asking you to take about $25,600, and I think it's $14 if we match what we did last year out of general fund.
Okay.
That was my question,
because I do think it's a good idea to encourage spaying and neutering, but I was just wanting to verify. So we basically are committing, if we do
That's what I would be asking for.
Increase for future years.
Yeah. And I've talked to Joyce by the mechanism that she would be comfortable with doing it, and she discussed, I won't discuss it completely because that's her realm, but we've talked with her about a mechanism of doing this as payable coming in and how it would be presented to you if it came through.
Okay. The other thing is on page 17, which on the ordinance, it was on page 9 under letter I, it says mitten instead of kitten, just FYI.
Oh, does it? Thank you.
It's the one required to vaccinate mittens.
Kittens and mittens.
Mittens?
Yeah, I know.
Kittens and mittens.
I will now have to vaccinate my mitten.
Fortunately, I don't think we offer a mitten vaccination.
Yeah, I know. And then you said that you talked to vets about it. I mean, you said the response is pretty positive.
It is fairly positive.
Are we going to have backlash from the ones who aren't on the...
I'm not going to say it's not possible. I can't
Okay.
speak for them. I have, because I'm looking at doing a spay neuter room, I'm going to be honest with you, we got a lot of things flowing on veterinary-wise. I had one veterinarian offer to come today, and I told her it would help, but I don't necessarily need to at this point. I'm glad to have her later. We have vets that I can tell you the overarching theme has been that the current licensing program that we have is ineffective and not incredibly well liked. That's dogs and cats. That's both of them. That's the one theme I heard from every single vet, that something needs to happen somewhere. Whether or not that's what I proposed, I did have suggestions from one vet that it was actually a really good vet, the suggestion of possibly offering a discount if the animal's already vaccinated or already microchipped, maybe discounting to some degree or a small amount, saying, hey, thank you for microchipping your animal. We had a few other vets that discussed how the vouchers would work and what they've seen and things like that. Overarchingly, I have to say it was positive. Can I say there won't be any backlash? I honestly can't say. I don't. I think I'm going to get a little bit of pushback on doing our own personal spay or neuters. But again, I'm looking at 400 animals at any given time in my building. I have a strict fiduciary responsibility to the public to take every dollar that I get and make sure I put it as best as possible the way they want me to spend it to get animals from point A to point B. And part of that would be reducing the logistics of having to send animals out of my building, taking up an officer's time in the morning. So I'm going to get some pushback on spay or neuter as well. Again, the majority of the vets are on board with it. And when I discuss it with them and I tell them if I have the bones to do something for surgery, and if I get a grant to do surgeries for something, I'd have to contract a vet to come do it. I may see some pushback. I may not. I don't foresee a huge pushback at this point. Every vet we've talked to has at least been, hey, this at least seems like something going in the right direction.
I think these are good ideas. I'll let someone else ask a question if they have it.
I appreciate the forward management instead of the reactive management.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, and again, it's fairly blunt. Something's got to change. At this point, we're still full on. Thankfully, Utah is actually going to come up and pick up some animals from us today, but we're still completely full on cats. My shelter is still running in capacity in December, which usually we should be pushing closer to 50% as we get towards the end of this month. We just got puppies again. I've got 2 litters of puppies. It's just we have to figure out a way to reduce the number of animals coming into the shelter rather than try to figure out a place to put them, because finding a place to put them, we're going to run out of that resource really quick.
Maybe you need to talk to the mayor of Napa, get some ideas.
He got some ideas, does he?
Well, he just authorized shooting the crows.
We don't have a crow problem, and I don't think we have
I don't even want to get near shooting. That's the police department. That's the police department's realm, not mine.
problem either, but
I imagine they'd be a little upset.
any other questions? Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
You'll have a good day.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 6 is development of a sign code committee. Council discussion regarding the development of a committee to review the city's sign code.
I just think that it's been a month since we said we were going to do something, and I don't know that we have. And so I think we ought to just set three representatives from the sign community and seek 3 people from the community at large and get that group going.
3 and 3?
I think you get too many, it gets unwieldy.
How many do you have on the flag committee?
15.
There you go.
I've had conversations with the sign guys, and they're working at getting more succinct information from the national level.
And that's what's in that envelope right there, a copy of the national sign ordinance.
No, that's not. That's a threat for litigation.
Really?
Yeah, that's the way I read that.
Yeah, that's a threat.
That's a threat of litigation from a nonprofit legal organization that says, if you don't do it our way, we're going to sue you. That's what I read in that. And so there's not an organized national standard when it comes to signs and reading light and all of that. And they are working on that right now. And they don't think it will be done in the next couple of weeks, but they're thinking that maybe in January we can start sitting down and looking at what that looks like. Because their problem is sign guys nationally, is they've got 1,500 different ordinances they have to deal with because there isn't a standard. And so every city comes along and tries to do their own thing, and then you've got 1,500 different lawsuits, and there's no continuity, there's no general acceptance. And so that's what they're working on their end. And I think it would be good to let them do that as a place for them to start their part of the conversation.
And setting up a committee doesn't preclude that.
Oh, I'm not opposed to the committee.
I just think we need to show some movement for both sides.
Agreed.
And that setting up a committee and keeping it fairly small where people can know each other and work together is the way to go.
And I think at least get to the point somewhere, we've come a long way just in the last couple of months based on there's never been a problem, they've never had a complaint, there's no standards out there. Well, that's all true, but they had some suggestions on how to fix things. Oh yeah, we can put this on there that works with the ambient light, and a sign isn't supposed to, electronic sign isn't supposed to be any more visible than a non-electronic sign.
Well, right. And I think for the most part, the reasons there weren't a lot of complaints is because people thought they had no recourse. They just had to live with it because there wasn't an ongoing discussion. And when we started the discussion, they started coming out of the woodwork.
Yep.
And so...
Yeah, I wonder where they were.
I agree.
So I just think if we, and we can suggest to you, Mayor, and you do it like other committees,
Well, we can just take the applications, we can put it out, take some applications and go through it. Set up an ad hoc committee, that's an easy thing to do.
but I think we ought to be intentional and have both the side.
Do we need to specify that it has to be a certain amount from one group or the other, or can
Sure
we just?
can.
Well, right, I
I
know we
think it
can,
should
but
be balanced. I think it should be
Okay.
balanced. I think we had enough testimony that was out of one group, but the other side wasn't that well informed. And when we did the hearing, then the other side started coming forward. And I just think people from residences or neighborhood groups or something like that could be part of this committee.
Oh, I definitely agree.
So,
Well, this committee could go on forever, so what I suggest that if we put a committee together, that it has a very short life, and we put a deadline on the committee that says, your time ends in 3 months, or whatever that is, so that there's action, so that this just doesn't roll on and on and on.
yeah, I agree with that.
We've already learned that there's ways to use inexpensive meters to see what signs are really doing and not really doing. And so I think there's some things that the city can be doing if we really want to do that. I mean, that's how I felt about the whole thing since we started. We've got a little enthusiasm going. Something that wasn't a problem that didn't need to be changed, that couldn't be changed, now can.
So I'm going down to Salt Lake to meet with the young sign folks and to look at their meters and see what they're doing and how they manage their signs.
And when you talk about, I had an observation the other day, they talk about how those electronic signs aren't active, they aren't moving signs, they just go from one sign to the next. That's becoming not necessarily that way anymore either. I saw the new one down on Fifth Street now. As that sign changed, it comes in from the side now. So it's moving like this. It isn't just this ad to this ad. It's this ad going out and a new one moving in. There's lots of things they can do with electronics, and I'm just saying that things aren't exactly the way we think they are with those. So I hope the city does something. I think there's some things we can do, and we ought to keep on it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the light levels that they're putting out. They seem pretty good about wanting to work with us on that.
Well, in the
So I
last
hope it
6
just
months,
doesn't
there's
go
a
away.
noticeable difference in a lot of signs.
Hope it just doesn't go away.
So as a committee of, I think that's really truly the question. I mean, we left it and Steve was going to work with the sign company and that was the end of where we were. And so we want a committee put together. Steve's been working with the sign companies, it sounds like.
Or do we want to keep that route and then create a committee, or?
That's
I think
the question I have.
we haven't had a lot of input from outside that group. And there are people that live in residences that have the impact on them and haven't had a voice, and I think we just give them a voice and a structure
You haven't been getting all those emails from those people?
Well, but that's different than being part of the molding process.
Well, no, I get that, but we've had an awful lot of
Oh, yeah, we've got a lot of
from
input
the
after the
people.
hearing. After
I'm
the
just-
hearing. Not just saying this, be proactive.
I think a committee would be good if it's time to set up a committee. If not, then
Do you
we're happy
visualize
to
this
put.
committee coming under the direction of our planning department?
Work with them.
What I would do is I would have them submit applications. We would get 3. If we want 3 and 3, we would get 3 from the sign companies. We'd get 3 community members, and we would do that. And we would have Melanie as the point person that would oversee that committee, yes.
I think you could go a little larger than that. There's enough interest in it that I think 15 people would be.
15?
Well, the reality is,
different interest groups.
the reality is you could get one from the sign community.
But they don't all agree.
Well, I'd say they could.
Yeah.
But that's what Steve's working on, is finding.
Well, I think it's reasonable to have the same amount, and I don't know from each side.
Hi,
Melanie.
Melanie Gigley, Planning and Development Services. I understand wanting to get a lot of people involved, but it becomes very unwieldy when you have that many people. You have a hard time getting everybody able to attend. My suggestion would be somewhere 7 to 9. We kicked it around as staff and half of one, and then maybe a hearing examiner or maybe a P&Z member or a past P&Z member that has heard the applications and the hearings that come before them, or someone that kind of steps out, is hearing it from a different perspective. Not a bad idea to let the sign contractors get some of their information together. Frankly, there are lots of model sign ordinances that we can get through planning organizations of other cities that address some of the most recent lawsuits and court cases that we probably should look at while we're doing this. You know, if we're going to go to this extent, we might want to make sure
And my
we're
conversations with
addressing other
them,
things.
my conversations with them is, we're not going to wait. So if you're getting information together, you better get it together. Because we're not going to wait 6 months for you
For
to
them.
do something.
Oh, I see.
Right. And because, I mean, that's what they're going to want to do, is they're going to string this out as long as possible.
Sometimes I don't want to accuse anybody of anything.
But that's just, I'm not
It's just
accusing
nature-
the
it's just
sign
the
guys of
nature
that. I'm just saying that's the nature of anybody that has to
But,
face
yeah.
change.
Change is difficult, and we are working as staff to pull some of those things already.
Great.
Let's go with Melanie's idea of 7.
Yeah.
Because all you need to do is recruit that one more neutral person.
Yeah.
Okay, and then have applicants on the other 3. I think we do that and, say that we want it back to us by June. Because there's a lag with holidays.
I think that's
Can
longer.
we-
What would you suggest in a time frame?
We got to get past the holidays.
Well, first of all, we've got to get the applications in, and so if you look at that, you've got to have an application processes, which is going to be a couple weeks. Then you have a selection processes, which is going to be a couple weeks. Before we get started, you're in the middle of January.
As I say, I kind of envision, given that we're right at Christmas and New Year's, that we could have a committee by the middle to end of January, and then if we had 30 to 60 days.
Okay.
Because our intent is not to meet for an hour here and an hour here and an hour here. It might be to wrangle them all into a room.
Okay.
First get some information out to them and say, here's some options for you that we're looking at. From all sides, we'll take all comers. And then start talking about, are we looking at a whole rewrite of our code? Are we looking at pieces, parts? And that part of that is at your direction. What do you guys want to see?
I would like to see it done sooner than later.
I think you get the committee together, but I would hate to put a hard stop date on it. If the committee is working together and they're moving it forward, actually moving forward, then
I give them a hard date, and if they are actually producing results, then we extend it.
Okay, and maybe that's the right way to go. By March 31st, we'll report to you in April. If in April we're still niggling at some things, maybe you give us.
That's a lot of time.
It's still longer than I would like to see something.
I really think if we didn't do a committee, this body could take action 1st of February.
Yes, if we did not bring it out to.
And why can't we do that even with a committee? if we just need to get them together in the first few weeks of January and
They're going
they
to get
just
together.
need to get together.
If
and-
we say, we're going to talk about this, come to this meeting at this time, they're going to come. They don't have to have a committee.
Oh, without a committee.
Right.
Yes, that would be a possibility.
And then we could nail down what we want
Well,
and
but
do
even
something
if we
in
had the
February.
official committee, I mean, like you were saying, maybe you only have 1 or 2 meetings and they get together and they just hash it out. It's not like they have to meet monthly over the course of 3 months.
In my perspective, the hearing showed that neither side had met to have any conversation. You know, the people that, there wasn't a lot of intuitive sense on the sign companies of what residents were experiencing. And the residents weren't very aware of what some of the dialogue was with free speech and some of that type of stuff. So somewhere, I think we need a group of people that are talking.
Committees have a tendency to,
They do.
and then it just goes away.
Yeah. So, but I think, you know, committees that have
keep a focus on it,
definition, focus, I think they can move.
Put focus on it and get it done. It can get done.
Well, it can. I'm just saying historically,
Well, but it's,
isn't
that's
necessarily
to
the
manage
case.
it. You gotta manage it.
If it's time-bound, that helps, because if you say you have to do something by this, it's also on me to make sure this occurs.
The downside of a committee is that we're adding time that is not
We are adding time.
necessary.
so Steve, what's your thoughts on, so you're going to meet with the young sign people. What's your thoughts if there isn't a committee? How's this going to unfold over the next month?
I envision the second week of January, we start pulling sign guys together, have a meeting with them, get their input. We can have public come in and have comment, and they can just be a Thursday at 6 o'clock, or not Thursday at 6 o'clock, on the second Thursday of.
Oh, that's hearing examiner.
Thursday at 6 o'clock. I like that.
But,
Maybe
I mean,
Thursday at 4.
there's nothing that says we can't just gather that information and that input and come to the same results of having people feel like they were heard. And I think we can accomplish the same thing in a shorter time frame.
I agree, and I think the solution is not going to be that extraordinary. I think the solution is going to be these signs, at least for the existing signs, the signs are too bright. What kind of a standard can we set at the city to hold them to? And then we're going to monitor those. I mean, it's really that simple, I think, is
Well,
we know that
light
the signs
detector
are
on there
adjustable.
instead of a
Exactly.
timer. So
Exactly.
instead of 10 o'clock before it goes dim, it's already done that at 5:30. And it adjusts to whether it's a cloudy day or a sunny
Exactly.
day. I mean, and we've heard that was relatively inexpensive and easy to do. I mean, there's some simple things that we can move forward.
And that
It's
might
just
fix
what
the
we want
problems.
to, how we want to address it. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah, and that is part of the question, is your direction at this specific issue, or did you want to take a broader look at some of the issues that are...
Well, obviously, we have to take a broader look because of the Supreme Court decision.
Supreme Court, yeah.
But are we, we've been focused on billboards.
Yes, we have.
And there's some simple solutions, I think, that can address those concerns
The immediate ones.
immediately.
Okay.
Is it, and I'd like to do that sooner rather than later. So is it advantageous for us just to have, okay, for the next 8 months, we're going to go through the whole thing, hash it out, and come up with a new one? Or is it okay if we do some of it piecemeal?
We're happy either way. I think you can...
I'd like to do 2-track or 3-track where we're looking at, okay, we're going to talk about billboards, what's the definition? I think one of the issues that came up is on-premise and off-premise. Obviously, through the court case, we can't really determine one way or the other on that. And so those are some of the things that we need to address immediately. That kind of stuff. But when it comes to the broader range, especially how do we enforce all the flag signs and the sandwich signs that are against the ordinance now that are out there all the time? Some of them are leaning over, some of them are in the road. I mean, all the things that we talked about in the past. And the sign people and businesses said, it's not a problem. It's a problem. they're not holding up, and we are not enforcing our own ordinance, and we have no real way to do it. So how are we going to address that? So I think that's a secondary issue of what does this really mean to us? Does it matter? But in the meantime, I think we need to have an immediate response to what we just went through for the last 6 months.
So it's especially the brightness of the
And I agree with you, Steve. And if you can put a committee together, you can bring everybody together and research it and make a decision, but if the city doesn't take any action with that and we don't do any enforcement, then nothing will change. And, to me, the ideal thing would be if I call up and complain about, we're just talking electronic billboards, if I call up and complain about an electronic billboard, we ought to have someone in the city that could go up there in the next day or two and put a meter on it and tell you whether it's within our guidelines or it isn't.
Yep.
And it should be that simple.
Take less than 5 minutes. I mean, it's not even going to take you 5 minutes once you're there.
Exactly.
Get out of the car, read it, go through a couple of cycles.
And the other sign issues you're talking about are the same thing. I mean, if you see something that's violating our policy, we ought to have somebody that can stop and tell the business owner, those are against the city code. We're going to give you a warning. If you don't take care of it, we're going to come cite you. And that's going to irritate a few people, and they're going to call the mayor, and then we're going to not enforce it anymore.
Well, and all the literature that we send out is going to have the mayor's cell number on it.
That's
right.
And that's true now. And we try to address signs as problems, code enforcement issues as we see them.
Right.
We are not out all the time.
Right.
So we do have to rely on people letting us know when they see a concern. I think we made some movement on a very bright sign that we had received some complaints about. We worked with a sign contractor. I let the residents know that had complained about that particular one and to please let me know if it had helped or not. I've not heard anything, so I'm assuming that it improved the situation. But we do have to rely a little bit on others being our eyes.
So if we don't do a committee, what's our timeline?
I'd like to have something in front of this council 1st of February.
Okay. Addressing really the regulation of the brightness.
Brightness and motion.
Yeah.
The motion factor is a huge safety factor.
What's the general standard? Is it 7 seconds? Is it 13 seconds? I mean, that kind of thing.
I honestly didn't come prepared to talk about the code, but the code does talk about transition.
It does.
That's what we need to do.
Yeah, the ones I saw in Utah are 8 to 10 on average.
And I think ours says 8 seconds. I'm not sure, but
That sounds right.
that sounds like what I read.
It was either 6 or 8.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that's what it turns into.
I think that's a good way to go, particularly where Steve's involved in it and he's willing to get that done.
Well, I made a commitment to the sign folks, and I want to follow through on that. And they made a commitment to me, so.
So are we, before February, are we not doing a committee?
No. I'd prefer not to. That's going to slow
Okay,
us down.
no committee, okay.
Would you like us to help you reach out as to methods to reduce brightness? Because I know you're working directly with some of them, but we work,
Absolutely.
I think, quite well with most.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, all right, no
I'm
committee.
feeling better
and
about it already.
Steve's going to take care of it. And,
There you go. Way to go, big horse.
okay, thank you then. Now, with that, we are adjourning from this meeting and going into a working lunch, or are we?
Oh, are we?
It wasn't on the calendar.
Working lunch? Do we have a working lunch today?
I thought they said
There will be a cost
It wasn't
somewhere.
on the calendar.
So we don't have a working lunch, it's not on the calendar.
It was noticed at the beginning of the study session, but if you choose not to, you're not required to attend, but if you choose
There's
not
no
to.
backing out now. You've offered up a free lunch, Mayor.
Hey, I'm happy to not have it.
You can't be taking it back now. Rick, you got to watch him. He'll try to give you lunch and then take it back. So keep an eye on him.
Well, it says possible, and so we are going to cancel the working lunch then.
Okay.
Well, I guess we're not off camera yet, are we?
Okay, we're canceling the working lunch. There will not be a working lunch then.
I think lunch has already been.
Oh, it's already been ordered at 11?
He's gone.
Okay.